Ubisoft is a master at publishing games with super intriguing ideas while consistently failing to reach any project's full potential. The reason for these failings is due to what many gamers sum up as the Ubi formula. For even if you like their games, it's hard to deny that when stripped of each one's unique setting and protagonist, on a pure gameplay level, they're quite interchangeable. That's not to say all of Ubisoft's releases are necessarily bad. The French company does publish some fun experiences, but quite a few fall into a repetitive open-world slog. Speaking from experience, they feel largely restricted by a design precedence built around a corporate-dictated checklist, rather than the creative whims of those coding the damn thing. And that is what made Watch Dogs Legion one of the more interesting Ubi releases in the past few years. Leading up to it hitting store shelves, it was marketed on its play as anyone and everyone gimmick. For if you're unaware, there is no defined protagonist here. Quite the opposite, actually, as literally any NPC walking within its world is playable. In more capable hands, this could have worked, but capable hands did not design this game, as without any exaggeration I can say with a straight face that the much maligned first game in the series is better. Where that title was a 5 or 5.5 out of 10 at best, Watch Dogs Legion is lucky to hit a 4. It's pretty bad, you guys.
Yeah.
Before getting into this review proper, let me just get the glitches and bugs out of the way first, because holy hell is there a ton of them. But I also don't want them to be the focus of this video as I have a lot to discuss, so quick montage time, here we go. Here's an invisible woman, and an invisible guard. After this cutscene ended, I failed my mission because the NPC I interacted with in a building seemingly got hit by a car when we were teleported outside. Here's 2 cars converging into one. I walked through a boat. Where'd my bike go? After I completed this paste-up challenge, my character went blind.
Now people will know that sack is here.
Instead of jumping the gap, this chick glitched through the drone and fell. This lady broke during darts. As did this one.
Come on then, mate, let's throw a few.
This woman couldn't be run over. After a mission with a drone, I wasn't reverted back to my character and I was stuck as a drone. When I tried to fast travel, I got permanently stuck in place. This scientist went poof. This protester fell into oblivion. And while this isn't a glitch, here's some footage of a fight. Setting all snark aside, I'll be upfront and admit that bugs and glitches don't always mean a game is terrible. I mean, Wasteland 3 is one of my favorite titles of the year, and that game crashed more than a 90-year-old granny driving in a winter storm while high on Oxy. But virtually none of the elements within Watch Dogs Legion save it from being an absolute dud. Which is a shame, as Watch Dogs 2 shows that the series has potential to be good. The developers on that sequel listened to criticism and expanded and improved upon areas where the first game had failed. Admittedly, even at the time of release, I wasn't a big fan of it, but I can acknowledge that it's a good game, and a vast improvement over the first one. I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10, but where Watch Dogs 2 moved the series forward, Legion stumbles backwards and undoes all the progress of what came before. I don't think I can critically analyze this game without first discussing all that 2 did right, so let's go over it. In WD2, the player could participate in car, kart, and boat races, among various other open-world activities. Adding even more content is that multiplayer was seamlessly entwined within the experience, opening up the door to competitive challenges and co-op. As for the core hacking mechanics, the player could make use of a handful of fun unlockable upgrades such as calling the police on enemies to force hectic shootouts. Yes, you can SWAT NPCs in Watch Dogs 2. Save that for the video games, don't do it in real life, kids. As for other abilities, stoplights can be hacked to force large car crashes, something which carried over from the first game, and underground pipes can be exploded to wreak even more chaos. This is great during escape sequences, especially if running from the cops. The police in general are quite aggressive, which can lead to challenging but high-octane car chases, and on top of that, the environment itself was full of color and personality. It is a good-looking game. It also functioned fairly well, with cars feeling just weighty enough. Hit something at full speed and you'll dramatically slow down or come to a halt. Legion, on the other hand, strips that all away. Your hacking abilities compared to the other titles are limited. You can't even hack stoplights. The world is ugly and devoid of anything interesting to see. The police AI is practically non-existent. There's 0 auto races, and for some audacious reason, it launched without multiplayer. There's just a note that it's coming in a month. Not even cars pack a wallop if you hit something. Although, for some reason, perhaps nothing irked me more than the fact that the player can't enter stores. In Watch Dogs 2, the player could travel to clothing shops and enter them to pick out new threads, and each store was full of personality and life. Yet here, you just stand outside a building and interact with a poster. Making that aspect worse is that the map doesn't tell you which store is which, so if you're looking for a particular place to shop, you just have to travel to a cluster of stores and hope it's there, and if not, go to the next cluster. It's incredibly short-sighted and incredibly lazy. And lazy seems to be the through line of this title because so much of it feels unfinished. Quite a few missions just come across as if the developers forgot to include an ending. A prime example of this is one where you need to tail a car to download some data, and towards the conclusion of that section, it's revealed that the car you've been following is a decoy that contains an active beacon calling down the police. You're then told you better run, so I sped down the road expecting a police chase, but no. The mission just ends. No wanted stars appear, no sirens, no nothing. In another instance, you flee from an apartment building and a cutscene shows police swarming you from all sides. But when you take control again, all that's there are 2 policemen and a single drone. You dispatch them and then progress through the area to a sea of flashing lights, yet there's no enemy shooting or trying to arrest you. Just to further emphasize how bad this is, at the end of one level I was told to survive an attack, and I killed a few people early, and instead of sending more enemies, I just had to awkwardly wait for over a minute as the timer ticked down. This happened later on too, and while more enemies were sent than the previous example, the AI glitched out and they didn't attack me. They just chilled in their vehicles until the timer concluded. I streamed the majority of my review playthrough on Twitch, and as my audience watched me doing this, we all just bitched about how bad it was. As it pertains to other missions, some have no fail consequence whatsoever, making the act of playing them null and void. In one instance, I needed to defend a screen from a bunch of drones, but my controller stopped responding, so as I scrambled to grab a backup, my drone was blown up. Yet instead of failing me, I just spawned in a new one. I then decided to just let my drone sit there and keep getting blown up. After I'd technically died a bunch of times, the timer ended and I passed the mission. When they're not outright broken, missions are just repetitive, with there being a heavy reliance on circle puzzles and spider-bot or flying drone segments, none of which are very fun. Then when the game does try to do something differently, it doesn't work. A micro drone segment where you have to fly past a bunch of obstacles goes on way too long, and then another has you navigating a set of dark rooms and it just amounts to you flying a drone with a flashlight showing the path, walking forward, swapping back to the drone to move the light to the next path, and rinse repeat. It was tedious, to say the least. Out of the entire game, only 2 missions were any bit memorable, and one is the only car race in the entire thing, and another was a pretty epic police chase. The latter standing out because it's really hard to sustain a decent police chase anywhere else within the game, largely because the AI sucks and you lose them in seconds, which is narrative breaking and nonsensical given the game takes place in a fascist police state with surveillance cameras and drones on every block. This is probably where I should segue into the plot of the darn thing. Keeping it short and spoiler-free, Watch Dogs Legion takes place in a post-Brexit London in what appears to be the early 1930s. It's never explicitly stated what year the game occurs, but tech has advanced well beyond where it's at now. Early in the game, the series' core hacker group DudSec gets framed with a heinous terrorist attack, and in the aftermath, a private military group called Albion takes over the city. This gives rise to what is essentially a fascist surveillance state. As the player, it's then your job to build a rebellion and to restore DudSec's former glory. This is actually a neat idea for a story, but like most Ubisoft titles, they don't fully commit to it, and it veers more towards the cringe side of the spectrum than anything. There's a lot to work with in such a universe, but the plot is nothing more than missed opportunity after missed opportunity. Backtracking to the epic police chase mission I brought up a few minutes ago, making that scene all the more memorable is that it ended when one of my favorite operatives died. And given the stakes involved, it felt really cool, because in case you weren't paying attention at the top of the video, the big marketing hook here is that there is not a defined protagonist. You can interact with every NPC and recruit them into your little rebellion, which then turns them into playable characters. Within this mechanic are some fun ideas, especially as each character has differing traits. For instance, you can recruit an old woman who is limited in her mobility and who also has flatulence, so stealth becomes a no-no as her farts will give you away. Or you can go with the construction worker who has a brutal nail gun that can get easy kills, but he is doomed, meaning he will just spontaneously up and die at some point as you're playing as them. It's this mixture of traits and perks that opens the door for potential goofiness. This lack of a protagonist works hand in hand with the game's coolest feature, which is permadeath. This was marketed long before its release, so I was surprised that it's a pre-game setting which can be turned on and off. Naturally, I played with it on, but it doesn't all feel like a core part of the experience. The game simply does not care about your characters. Lose one in the ending of a mission and you get a mission success alert, which could be fine, as in my example above. Losing an operative when police killed him after he'd been set up by the villain was kinda cool, and if done right, could add massive stakes to the story. Yet the game treats his death like a joke. It's so bad that when one departs this mortal coil, it's usually met with a one-liner. The game cares so little about him that their loss is a joke, which doesn't mesh with the super serious story it's trying to tell. Making it even worse is that there's no screen anywhere in the game to see the list of lost operatives. The game cares so little about your fascist police state resistance group that you can't even see a digital memorial for those who've died. This becomes all the more ridiculous when multiple times in the story the narrative tries to force sadness. I can't say much here because of spoilers, but the game uses overly long scenes in an attempt to push the player to sympathize with certain NPCs, and it doesn't work. Maybe it could have if the game gave way to our deaths, but it doesn't. And if the game doesn't want us to care about those we spent hours playing as, why would I give two fucks feeling bad for someone I barely know? That's fucking stupid. The game can't even fully commit to the permadeath either, because during the final mission, dying just reloads checkpoints. And while out in the open world, if you come across one of your members walking around, if you run them over or go so far as to explode your car on their body, they basically walk it off. Likewise, you can't fall to your death, which I wish you could. It'd add more weight to the game's proceedings. Imagine accidentally missing a jump or getting into a bad car wreck only to lose someone you liked. Yeah, it would suck in the moment, but at the same time it'd make things more tense and enjoyable. At least for me it would. This game's lack of care for our characters pushed me to the point where I just intentionally killed off those I didn't use. I had so little attachment to them that I just did things like this. Not everything here is a total failure, as yes, throughout the course of my 50-hour playthrough, that long because I got the platinum trophies I do with most reviews, I did grow an attachment to some characters. The game itself didn't do anything special to make them likable, but as I streamed the game, my audience and I put personalities onto certain people and I played into it. We had an old cripple we called Mr. Waddles, and we mourned his death after we got into a fight he couldn't slowly walk away from. And then there was S&M Conspiracy Granny. The scene where we met her established her as a conspiracy theorist, but then I decided that wasn't enough, so I decked her out in as close to kink gear as I could get. If I was playing by myself, the joke would have worn off mighty quickly, but it was fun to subject my audience to old women in panties. I don't actually know what that says about me. Aside of stuff like that, the characters aren't very good, and the lack of a defined protagonist hurt the experience. Take when my character died during the police chase. That should have been a big moment in the plot, but the narrative doesn't recognize it. During the following cutscene, the next random character took over and was treated as if they'd successfully fled the 5-0. Story nitpicks aside, the voice acting in the game is laughably bad. Listen to this. Like, actually listen to this.
It's you, isn't it? Dead sick. I never thought. I put it out there hoping, but you actually showed up. Brilliant. You've really lit a fire in Nine Elms.
Albion tries to stop us, but they ain't no bother. So what you got for us?
There's something fucking wretched going on in the old power plant under the mall.
All that aside, adding to the game's woes yet even further, and wow is there a lot of woes here, is that the act of obtaining new operatives is a goddamn chore. Recruitment missions outright suck. The tedious design surrounding them pushed me to the point where I stopped experimenting with new character types because I didn't want to do yet even more of the same repetitive tasks. Here's a common example of how it goes. You scan someone with your phone, see that they have good traits, and initiate the recruitment process. In many instances, this means using something called the Deep Profiler to do a small mission to raise their respect in DedSec. In this instance you see here, they're under surveillance, so you go to deal with that. Once that short mission is complete, you can now do the recruitment mission, which has you go to their location to talk to them because what are phones? So you do that only to be directed to another mission, one which is usually all the way across town. After traveling there, you infiltrate a building to download some data, only to then be sent to another location all the way across town to destroy some AI blueprints. With that completed, the person is now in your party. Adding to the time-wasting headache is that the game's bugs and glitches, or just outright bad design choices, get in the way. I actually failed a mission for doing what I was supposed to do. I was tasked with stealing a van and driving it to a drop-off location. But when I got to the location, the gate was locked, which means I had to leave the vehicle so I could cross to the other side so that I could find the hackable box to open the gate. Yet as I was opening the door, I was failed for being out of my vehicle for too long. Many of the recruitment missions are randomized, so I got fucked over because of that. 20 to 30 minutes down the drain. Cool. Obviously, the game doesn't want to make it too easy to get new recruits, but going the route of pure tedium isn't the solution either. When not doing stupid missions, the world is largely devoid of anything interesting. As stated earlier, there's no races or activities of that sort. The only side content is bare-knuckle boxing matches, which offer zero challenge as you just have to know to dodge. Outside of that are parcel fox missions for if you really want to handle someone's package, a soccer minigame that wears thin super quickly, the least enjoyable version of video game darts I've ever witnessed, 42 pace-up challenges which just waste time if anything. They also broke multiple times and I was never able to get the final mission complete reward for them. And there's a shit ton of collectibles because who doesn't love that? There's even a million little green tech points hidden throughout the world, and they show up on your radar after you make a district defiant. Yet there's way more of them in the game than you can actually use, so my map became cluttered with objects I don't need and can't use. Yay. When you can use them though, tech points are used to obtain better gadgets and updates. There's things like AR cloaks, missile drones, turret hacking, and you get the idea. It's basically this game's level up system, and you can mix and match which gear an operative has equipped, which outside of clothes is the only customization they really have. Speaking of clothes, these are purchased using the game's in-game currency, which you earn from missions and such. But guess what? Ubisoft being Ubisoft sells the currency for real money in the game's microtransaction store. Usually I ignore this kind of stuff as it's to be expected in most games these days, but the store here is particularly galling. For one, I think this is the reason mission payouts seem really low. Like, it takes a lot of time to build up a ton of money. But secondly, the prices on items are really scummy. I'm talking 10 real American dollars for some costumes or a new operative, and on top of that, everything can only be purchased using a currency paid for with real money, and the prices can only be summed up as entrapment. What I mean by this is that 500 Ubi coins, or whatever the fuck they're called, can be purchased for $5. But let's say you use 300 of those to buy some in-game currency. There's no other item that costs 200. Therefore, to use the rest of the $5 you paid into the game, you'd have to buy more coins using yet even more real money. I'm sure lots of games are like this and I've just never done the math, but I noticed it here and this level of villainy needs to be called out. And fuck, this review is now nearing 4,000 words. I should probably wind this down. Just to get a few other things out of the way, the world itself doesn't look good. I get it's a police state in London of all places, but the lack of color here really stood out. I'm not saying all titles need to be vibrant, but the architecture combined with the browns and grays just made for a boring ass video game world to explore. Absolutely nothing is memorable, and even the neon future aesthetic is ugly. It's a boring depiction of future tech. And just Jesus. Boring seems to have been the design philosophy here. Like, why the fuck is this flying drone so slow? There's drone hubs every couple blocks, so it's not slow to prevent you from using it to cheese missions, and they're already accessible outside of every mission area. Likewise, ugly must have been a design philosophy too, because characters look like ass. It is hard to find an attractive NPC to play as. Were the key artists on this game Tumblr refugees or something? Or what's up here? Anyways, fuck this game. I'd rather live in an actual police state than ever touch it again. 4 out of 10.
Right, here we are. These prisoners were detained for attempting to reveal operations intelligence to external agents. Whistleblowers. Perhaps they even tried to contact DedSec. Luckily, you can reroute the plane.
Bags, you're so smart. Now,
Rerouting plane.